Greetings, rejects, and welcome to your #1 guide to becoming the best psyker ever. What?
Number 1. Best psyker? What is this heresy?
I am a good psyker, okay?
The game isn't fully out, and you claim to be the best psyker?
Greetings, rejects, and welcome to a decent beginner guide on how to play psyker. Is that better?
Much. Proceed.
Now, before I get started, this was made during the pre-order beta, meaning there's going to be balance changes and whatnot. I'll make sure to update this whenever there is a major balance change. Let's take a second first to talk about psyker and what to expect. As a psyker, you have the ability to clear and crowd control hordes based on the staff you use. We'll get into that later. While capable of dealing devastating damage to elites, specials, and hordes, it is essential to be aware of your surroundings, as you do not possess the toughness and sturdiness other classes have. Well, yeah, there are many ways to regenerate your toughness. Positioning is vital for a psyker, as being swarmed will lead to you being unable to cast and ultimately going down. Unlike other classes, psykers have to manage their peril, a buildup that occurs when using your psyker-specific weapons and brain burst. If you fail to silence the voices, well, let's just say you'll have something in common with the Poxburster. There are several ways to quell your peril. 1. Holding the reload button while having psyker weapons or your hands out. 2. Using your main ability, Psychonetic's Wrath. 3. Class and weapon traits. Now, let's dive into the psyker's feats. Your main ability is the Psychonetic's Wrath. When used, it quells 50% of your peril and staggers enemies in front of you. Comes in very handy when your peril buildup is very high and you need to quell some to keep on casting. It's worth noting that even when you're in the overcharge animation, you can still use it and it'll save you from combusting. Instead of grenades, psykers have Brain Burst, a high damage single target ability, very effective against elites and specials, especially the runner specials, as it will damage them as long as you've initiated the cast on them, even if they're way out of sight. Kinetic Presence is the aura that the psyker provides to allies in coherency. All allies in range get plus 10% damage against elite enemies. Psykers have 2 passives. First, the Warp Siphon. Every time an enemy is eliminated with Brain Burst, you gain a warp charge. Each charge gives plus 3% damage and can stack up to 4 at a time. The effect lasts 25 seconds. Second is Battle Meditation, which is 10% chance to quell 10% peril on enemy elimination. Now, let's get into the traits. Every 5 levels, a tier of traits is unlocked. Each tier has 3 traits. Here, you can see what I'm running on my level 30 psyker, but this is not a build video. I'll briefly go over the different talents and what they do. For tier 1, we have Essence Harvest. Get back 30% toughness over 5 seconds every time you gain a warp charge, which is the charge you gain after using Brain Burst. You'll see that there are other ways to gain warp charges as we go through the rest of the traits. Warp Absorption. Get back 10% toughness every time you eliminate an enemy with a warp attack. Force staff attacks, force sword special attack, and brain burst are all considered warp attacks. Quietude. Every time 10% peril is quelled, you get 5% toughness back. You can quell peril by holding the reload button, using Psychonetic's Wrath, and traits on the staff. Tier 2. For some reason, this is called Psychonetic's Wrath. You can gain 5 to 15% damage on force attacks. Not all attacks, just the force attacks, based on the peril buildup. The higher it is, the more damage you get. Inner Tranquility. For each warp charge, you gain 6% peril resistance, meaning you can have 24% peril resistance, or 36 if you go for the warp battery, which is a trait in tier 5. Rack and Ruin. Eliminating an elite or special enemy with Brain Burst applies 2 stacks of Soul Blaze to all enemies within 3 meters of the target. Soul Blaze is a damage over time debuff, basically like a burn. Tier 3. Psychic Communion. There is a 4% chance to get a warp charge whenever you or allies in coherency eliminate an enemy. If you use this, make sure to be around teammates to get maximum benefit. Psychonetic's Aura. Whenever you eliminate an elite, you and allies in coherency get back 15% of your combat ability. Note that it's only on elites. This one's hard for me to say. Cerebral Laceration. Using Brain Burst on an enemy will increase damage done to them from all sources, except warp attacks. by 15% for 5 seconds. This is very useful against bosses and monstrosities. Tier 4, kinetic deflection. While below critical peril being when your peril is red, blocked attacks will cause peril buildup instead of stamina loss. Kinetic shield, 10 to 33% damage reduction from ranged attacks based on the number of warp charges you possess. Mind in motion. This is one of my favorites as I hate being slowed down. No movement speed reduction while quelling peril. Tier 5, warp battery. You can now store 6 warp charges. This probably affects any ability that depends on warp charges, like inner tranquility. Kinetic overload. When at maximum warp charges, instead of gaining or refreshing your warp charges, you apply 4 stacks of Soul Blaze, which is the burn, to a nearby enemy, prioritizing elite enemies. Kinetic flare. All your attacks have a 10% chance to trigger brain burst on a target. Yep, all attacks, even area attacks with your staff. This, however, can only occur when you're below red peril, and it has a 15-second cooldown. Finally, tier 6, quicken. When using your main ability, Psykinetic Wrath, all warp charges are consumed and you gain 12.5% cooldown reduction to your main ability per warp charge consumed. So by default, 4 charges will give you 50%, and if you're using warp battery, 6 will give you 75%. Ascendant Blaze. When using Psykinetic Wrath, all enemies hit by it will get Soul Blazed based on the number of warp charges you have. So if you have 4, you'll apply 4 stacks. This too will consume your warp charges. However, every enemy with Soul Blaze has a 10% chance to give you back a warp charge, no matter who eliminates them. Kinetic Barrage. For 10 seconds after casting your main ability, your Brain Burst charges 25% faster and has a 50% reduced peril buildup. And that concludes the feats. Weapons and Curios. The game has so many different weapons you can decimate heretics with. Some available to everyone, like the chainsword, lasgun, axes, dueling swords, auto guns, etc. And some are class specific. The PSYKER ones are the force sword and 4 different staffs. It is ideal to go with force weapons as that's how you gain back your toughness from either quelling peril or using force attacks based on the trace you've chosen. But that doesn't mean you can't enjoy any other weapon. I personally stuck to the lasgun as my ranged weapon till I got the staffs that I like. Now for the force sword. The PSYKER's main primary weapon. This thing deals crazy damage. The special attack hits for more than the brain burst, especially useful when you're charged by a rager and have no time to use brain burst, since the special attack charge is way quicker. Oh yeah, and it does more damage when you use a heavy attack. The sword has a really strong stagger that doesn't cost peril buildup, unless you complete the follow-up. When swarmed by a horde, you can use it to keep them staggered while comboing them. Not to mention, since it's a force weapon, you are able to quell with it out. You unlock the sword early on, pre-level 10. Oh, and one last thing. The force sword can gain a trait allowing it to block both melee and ranged attacks. Comes in handy as gunners really hurt. Now, for the 4 staffs. We'll go in order of unlocking. Oh, before we get started, all staffs except the Purgatus have the same projectile primary attack. First one you unlock is the Trauma Force Staff. This staff creates an area explosion. The longer you charge it, the bigger the area and damage. It also knocks down enemies it does not eliminate. I personally don't use it as it scatters mobs around and can mess up teammates, since they'll fly behind them and they cannot keep them stacks to cleave down. Next is the Surge Force Staff, or as I like to call it, the Force Staff. Makes you the God of Thunder. I've heard it unlocks at 10, I got mine at 15. This staff does decent damage and massive crowd control. It can crowd control all mobs except bosses and monstrosities. The lightning bounces to nearby enemies, however, most of the damage is done to the target you're aiming at. The higher you charge it, the more damage it does. Though half a charge is enough to CC and do good damage. When swarmed, you can do a sweep and the lightning will CC more targets. Third is the Purgatus Staff, or the Flamethrower. This is the only staff that has a different primary attack. It releases a quick puff of fire that applies Soul Blaze on enemies it hits. The secondary, when charged, will release a continuous flame that will burn through hordes. The longer you charge, the longer it lasts. While this is great for hordes, it lacks the range, so dealing with gunners can be an issue, as Brain Burst takes a while to charge and builds up a lot of peril. Finally, last and my personal favorite, the Void Strike Staff, or as I like to call it,
Hadouken!
The secondary attack releases a ball of fire that passes through enemies and will not stop till it hits a solid object. This staff will obliterate hordes. Plus, it has the range to reach gunners. Big damage all around. Like other staffs, the longer you charge, the more damage you do. However, for hordes, you really don't need to charge it that much as long as you aim for the head. As for Curios, there's so many different stats on them, from damage reduction against specific enemies to XP increase. I personally favor toughness since Psyker is low on toughness, and corruption resistance to avoid getting that purple corruption buildup when hit by mobs. Tips and tricks, leveling and playing Psyker. 1. Try everything. Since you do not unlock everything from the get-go, use this opportunity to try different weapons, melee and ranged. See how different weapons feel like and what you might favor over, let's say, the Force Sword. 2. Discarding gives money. Since currently in the open beta there's no salvaging, and honestly I'm not sure if it'll be a feature, you can discard stuff for money. That's how you sell them. 3. It is okay to stick to low level missions till you get better gear. The difference between sedation and uprising is only 100 XP, and malice can be a little challenging at lower levels. So going for a lower level mission with special conditions plus secondary objective will give you more XP over a higher one you struggle through and may end up losing. 4. Do not go alone. Unlike other horde games, in Darktide, sticking together benefits the entire team in many ways. You get a passive toughness regen and class coherency aura. You can see to the right of your health bar how many allies are in coherency. The higher the number is, the better the passive toughness regen, the more auras you get. In short, sticking together equal winning. 5. Do not be scared of your peril. You have your main ability to quell 50%. There's the meditation passive that gives the 10% chance to quell 10% on elimination, and since the staff hits multiple targets, it will most definitely kick in. Oh, staffs too have traits like percentage quelled on weak point hits as an example, so you'll be fine. 6. Recharging Brain Burst. You can hold right click with Brain Burst to pre-charge it, so as soon as you see a target, you can lock on him and insta-cast. However, be warned that pre-charging will keep building up peril. So use it when you hear a Poxhound or Pox Burster running up and you do not have line of sight on them. So as soon as they pop in, you got them. 7. Brain Burst and line of sight. As long as you've locked on, you can break line of sight and hide behind cover. Use that to your advantage to avoid unnecessary damage. 8. Push the Pox Burster. Do not be scared of the Pox Burster. Yes, he swan dives into you, and it's terrifying, but you can shove him off back and he'll just pop away from you. Doesn't have to be the Force Sword, you can push him with any melee. I see a lot of people panic and start to run, and you cannot outrun a Pox Burster. 9. Quelling. This will be based on what you pick for your tier 1 trait. If you went with Orb Absorption, you want to be quelling whenever you have a chance, so you can constantly cast and gain back your toughness. If it's Quietude, you want to have a buffer so that you can quell when you need toughness. 10. Dodging. It's important to stay on the move. You can cast and dodge backwards when hordes are flocking towards you. Also, you can dodge as you see the glint from gunners, as that means they're targeting you and about to shoot you. So firing and dodging to cover will save you from taking unnecessary damage. 11. You're not a tank. While it's not a big deal on lower difficulties, you want to stay behind since you're more useful when you're casting and not taking damage. Positioning is very important. 12. Force Sword combo. Your CC doesn't cost peril if you do not follow up the push, so when hordes are around, use it to your advantage. For example, 3 left clicks and push. 3 left clicks and push. Oh, and don't forget to dodge. That's it for this guide. I hope you enjoyed the video, and if you want to see more, make sure to leave a like, subscribe, comment. Any feedback you have can help me improve. I didn't want to add this mid-video, so I appreciate you if you made it this far and are listening to my shenanigans. And go forth, rejects, slay the heretics.